It's interesting, this week we have December 8th, the commemoration of the enlightenment of the Buddha. Rahatsu, I just learned today from a Dharma holder, Russ Michael, with whose group I sit in White Plains, that that means in Japanese the 8th day of the 12th month. So in any case, it's 8th of December. It's intriguing that that corresponds also to the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in the Catholic liturgy. They're both about enlightenment, certainly a radical, root kind of enlightenment. But that makes it all the more incumbent upon us to, talk about what, enlightenment really means, dimensions of it. And the climate, in the world and the nation and in churches and families, is so divided and partisan and ferocious sometimes, that we really should talk more about that phenomenon and how we should view it and how we should cure it. Attending to it first of all in ourselves, how we should understand it. So I thought I'd use especially Bernie Glassman, of course, as you know, who passed very recently, a great Zen pioneer who was my teacher's teacher. And a book I've used in the past is a little volume called The Infinite Circle, Teachings in Zen. It's basically a commentary on the Heart Sutra and on the Sandokai, the identification of relative and absolute, and then some discussion of the precepts. So quite a bit for a small volume, and to my mind, it's the best presentation in the simplest and most profound, accessible, challenging presentation of the Zen vision, the Zen perspective that I've found. With the possible exception of Shunryu Suzuki's, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. But to my mind, this actually is a more, intriguing, in a sense, a more accessible view. And what made me think of him is not just the fact that he's recently passed, but he's famous for a line, when he had this very laid-back, kind of hippie-ish approach, especially in later years. And every time he'd make a statement, or an assertion, here's the great Zen master, sharing his wisdom, and he'd say, "Just my opinion, man," which was true. He had that, as I say, he had this manner about him. That's why he and Jeff Bridges, the dude, from the Big Lebowski, published a book together a few years ago. They had the same kind of attitude, approach to life. But that's really what we need. We need all of us to be able to say, after we've shared and voiced our strong convictions about whatever, just my opinion, man. Because that's all it is. And we have to have, humility about ourselves. No matter to whom we appeal, it's still what we believe. And we have to have the humility that goes with, well, where is that coming from in me? It's so easy to think, well, I have this pure view, or I'm giving tradition, or I have a particular wisdom. But come on. So the first passage I'd like to use from here is when he's talking about likes and dislikes, preferences and opinions. What stands in the way of realizing, the emptiness is our strong attachment to our likes and dislikes, which feeds our powerful convictions of right and wrong and good and bad. The fact that I like something does not mean that it's good or right, any more than my dislike of something means that it's bad or wrong. I like something, I dislike something, nothing special. Our likes and dislikes are expressions of karma. I'm going to come back to that when I finish the paragraph. And karma, too, is empty. That's true as well, but it can change at any moment. There's nothing intrinsically true, significant, or meaningful about liking or disliking. They have no substance, emptiness. It's all part of a bigger whole that you can't pick and choose. At this moment, for such and such reasons, I happen to like this and dislike that. There's nothing wrong with that. It could even be wonderful, it says. But so what? We tend to think there must be something basically or inherently true about our dislikes and likes, that others should share them. That's right. Yeah. You've got to think the way I do. And that we're going to have them forever, which is also hopefully not true. Yet if I like brunettes more than blondes, all that follows is that I like brunettes more than blondes. But this karma thing is interesting. Why do we believe this or that, or like this or that? I mean, partly it's just temperament, and if you like broccoli more than asparagus, I mean, probably there's no deep reason for that. Probably better check. But for deeper preferences or views of the world, religious views, political views, it's your karma. In other words, in more psychological or social language, it's where you're coming from culturally, the way you were trained, the way you were raised, your family, your race, your nation, your religion. All those things are conditions, are conditioning. No more nor less. So as he says, it can be wonderful, it can be fine, but just don't try and impose them on somebody else as if they're better than somebody else's way. And you might think that they are, but then you've got to check, well, why do I have to think that my way is better? Why is it better? I mean, is there even a response to that? It's just what it is. I mean, they're dislikes and dislikes, very often. So we have to ask, where are we coming from in that? Have a deeper understanding of our karma, and of our deeper identity, and therefore our cultural conditioning. That's what the sitting is for. We can separate ourselves, our deeper selves, from the conditioning, and then have a more relaxed, objective, hopefully, whatever that means, view of the conditioning, and not be so attached to it, so clinging to it. Realize it's conditioning, no more nor less, very often. And then we can listen to other people. Because we're not so clinging and so attached to, our view, because we see it's conditioning, for the most part. We can come back to that in a second. Then we can sympathetically, but with greater detachment, and hopefully leading to greater detachment on their part too, listen to other people where they're coming from. Why do you believe this or that, politically or socially or religiously, well, what's your life experience? What's your karma? How were you treated, by government, by your family, by education, by business, by all? What race do you belong to? What socioeconomic class do you belong to? What country do you belong? What religion do you belong? What was your religious training? How oppressive or liberating was that? So once you are alert to that in yourself, and this is why, let's face it, a certain amount of psychological help training psychological work is important, as well as sitting. Well, you can be more sympathetic. Maybe help them to see that that's just conditioning too, but also let it be what it is. Also, that's legitimate. So if they have a political view that's different from yours because of their experience, and you're aware that your political view is because of your experience, well, you can both be a little detached about it and say, okay, this is my preference. This is what I think needs to be done because of where I'm coming from. Oh, and you can uphold that. And this is where I think needs to be done becoming from where I'm coming from in my education and my psychological conditioning. Okay, then you can even have a disagreement. But you'll be fundamentally detached and sympathetic to each other, welcoming of each other's view. Well, I legitimately see why you think that because of you. And who am I to say that might not be what needs to be done in this situation? It may be different from my experience or what I would have considered, but wow, maybe. So have a certain humility about it. Today, I think, and this is true in academia, for example, but also in politics, you can see it in the churches, there's coming away from seeing nations or empires and patriarchy and the white male and all that stuff is all that conditioning. We're coming to see through that more and react against that, rightfully so. Again, in the church and government and business and entertainment, the whole thing. But the danger is, and people are pointing this out, that what do we substitute for that? We substitute very often identity politics. I just got news this week that Ann Piruccello, who's a longtime Zen practitioner in California, just became a Roshi in our tradition. She's a professor of philosophy at San Diego University, and among other things. And it said in her little blurb that she's been fighting to keep freedom of speech on campuses. Because as you know, there's all this reaction against, we don't want to have that person come to our campus. We don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear, and it's just fear. I mean, it's just, come on, get over yourselves. Yes, neglected identities need to be protected and recognized, and upheld. Women and gays, whatever, trans, all these things are really, really, really important. But if you, again, fall into a category of only that, well, then it's just a category. It's another condition in the sense that you're separating yourself out, putting yourself potentially in opposition to everybody else. And then you can't even talk anymore, which is what we see. I saw this even in a comic strip this past week. I forget the name of the comic strip in the Daily News, but on Tuesday they had one. And this is the other side of it, where you don't want to give any definition at all. We don't want to categorize it at all, because then you can understand where that's coming from. But it can be humorous sometimes. This woman in the cartoon was having an ultrasound, and then so the parents, she and her husband, were saying, so what is it? What sex is it? And the doctor says, oh no, I'm not going there. This is 2018. I'm not getting into trouble. And there are people who use they as a pronouns rather than he and she. Great, explore, but it can get a little funny. But embrace that, with the same kind of lightness, hopefully, that they should be embracing it. But then today, the cartoon was in the other extreme. These two mermaids, were being interviewed, down in the ocean, and one of them says, now you can't just call us mermaids. I'm part halibut, and she's part shark, and we want to have our identities clearly marked. You see why they make a joke out of it. Now, mind you, it is important, but the more we limit ourselves by categories, the more trouble we're going to eventually be in. So the ideal would be fully to respect all of those things, and to identify with whatever you want to identify with, but not be completely swallowed up by it, and certainly not be in opposition to others, who hopefully will not be in opposition to you, but be able to live, to get to where? Where to a deeper level. Now, so let's explore that just for a second. I'm going to use these 3 successive koans of Joe Shu. I think I've used them once before, but they're very short koans that follow in succession in the Blue Cliff record, and they'll steer us in a direction that'll be helpful here, and then I'll go back to Bernie. So, Joe Shu's stupid oath. Zen is always bashing people around. It's compassionate, charity or compassionate scolding. So a monk asked Joe Shu, and this is his famous phrase, Joe Shu, which fits in exactly with what we're saying. The ultimate path has no difficulties, just avoid picking and choosing. Stop identifying with preferences and likes and dislikes. Remember, that's part of the noble truths as well, right? I don't want this, I want this. So the monk says, well, what is not picking and choosing? And Joe Shu says, in the heavens and on earth, I alone am the honored one. Now that sounds like supreme egotism, right? But no, that's a reminder of, talking about this Buddha's enlightenment that we're celebrating, that's what he said when he was enlightened that morning under the Bodhi tree. more or less. He said, I and the great heavens and this great earth all are enlightened together. And as the commentary on that says in the Dunko Roku, the I who's saying that, I in all things, is not the I that's sat down there the evening before. It's the whole universe. I and the great earth and all things have achieved the way. So that I is now the Buddha, it. Which is the point. If you're not picking and choosing, then you can be the whole universe because you're not preferring one thing over another. Otherwise, you're getting in the way, not only of the universe, but of your own self, which is everything. You're limiting yourself in a way that's sad and harmful for you and for everything else. So that's his response to that. Picking and that's what's not picking and choosing. When you are everything, the monk said, that's still picking and choosing. Well, obviously not. So that's why he calls him a stupid oaf. And the monk was speechless. Of course he is. I hope he is, anyway. The next case, well, this is just a caution. The ultimate path has no difficulties, just avoid picking and choosing. Monk asked Joshu, isn't this just a cliche? Well, something doesn't become a cliche just because it's repeated. It becomes a cliche if it's not practiced deeply, which of course is what's happening to the monk here. And the note explains that in Chinese, and maybe Christine can confirm this, that the word that's sometimes used for the cliche means a nest. So if you get nested in your little rut way of thinking and expressing yourself, well, then that's a cliche. It's very good. It's a very good image for it. And of course, if you just keep repeating a formula, well, that's all it's going to be. So Joshu says, once someone asked me, but I really couldn't explain it for 5 years. Meaning, of course, you can't explain it. It becomes a cliche if you try and explain it. And it's just words. But if you're living beyond words, if you're the whole universe, well then. And finally, monk asked Joshu, the ultimate path has no difficulties, just avoid picking and choosing. So as soon as there are words in speech, this is picking and choosing, huh? So how do you help people, teacher? Well, that's a good point, right? It seems to be. That's the whole point, is not to be using the words. Joshu said, well, why don't you quote this saying in full? The monk says, I only know that much. So Joshu said, it's just this. This ultimate path has no difficulties, just avoid picking and choosing. The point is, no, don't say any more. That's already too much. But that's it. It has to be lived. And that's why in the commentary, it remarks that this is like a stone-struck spark, like a flash of lightning. And if it's not a flash of lightning when you realize no picking and choosing, then you haven't gotten it yet. You're just repeating a formula, which of course is what the monk's talking about. So yes, you have to be everything. And that's where Bernie goes with this. If we are the whole universe, what don't we have? He speaks about many times here the one body. It almost sounds Christian, the one body. There's just one body. The one body. We are it. If we're the whole universe, what don't we have? What could be lacking? Money? Love? Some quality the other person has? We are that other person. And that other person is us. Our function. Isn't it wonderful how we can function in so many spheres all at the same time? Wow. I'm that person of the other race and the other religion and the other political party. I'm them and they're me. Their views are mine. Wow. Think of that. You don't have to take a position in regard to all those. Protect yourself against them as some kind of threat or some kind of challenge, because they're already yours, because you're them and they're you. I am the earth and the whole universe. Wow. Imagine if we all realized that. Which of course is exactly what we say Jesus did, in the incarnation or on the cross, taking on everybody's everything, because that was already connected to him. But if we can't see that this is all one thing, then we need everything and can never be satisfied. It'll be like hungry ghosts, as he goes on to explain, trying to grab everything because our little self is too threatened, too narrow, and too separate. Once we drop the self, he says on the next page, ignorance, anger, or greed become selfless desires because we realize that all of us are one body. I now have the desire for the whole universe to be enlightened. Why? Because I want me to be enlightened. And I am enlightened. I no longer function out of my notion of the small self, but rather out of the realization of the big self, which is nothing other than the whole universe. So we do want the whole to be enlightened. But the enlightened is to embrace everything just the way it is. Now, I do think if you have a certain amount of psychological illumination or honesty or insight, and you're living out of compassion, and you're living out of freedom, and you see the pitfalls that psychologically and spiritually you've fallen into in the past, you can tell that some views are more enlightened than others. I think that's true. Otherwise, how could you want them to be enlightened? You to, But the point is, all of that's you. All of it's you. So you can never react self-righteously because there's no self. And you're not separate. You can never react with anger or impatience because you're just reacting with anger and impatience against yourself. And if you've learned compassion for everything, then you've learned compassion for everything, starting with you. So wisdom can prevail, but it has to involve getting beyond the picking and choosing and embracing everything and everyone as they are in love, because they're you.